Welcome, everyone, to another installment of a YouTube live stream Friday with Mr. David Green himself. Super excited to jump into tonight's topic. We're going to be asking the question, would you actually regret buying a house in 2023? So we'll see you right around the corner. All right, we are here on Friday, ready to jump in and get this party started. Let's see who we got here tonight in the chats. We have, looks like Tanya Lutz from Northwest Michigan. Great to meet you. Rhonda, as always, from the David Green team from NorCal. Good to see you. Dora from Napa. We have Jessica from San Diego. Great to have you here. Looks like we have Tyrone from South New Jersey. Looks like we have Dominator. That's a cool name, from Nashville. Let's see here. We got Lisa, once and always, from Southern California. Our boy Javier, ni hao, good to see you. Jessica from South Carolina. I'm loving it. We got a lot of people representing. Check this out. We have Dane all the way from Okinawa, Japan. That's pretty cool. Good to have you here. Do us a favor. If you are here and you're hanging out with us, I'm just curious, type into the chat box, what's one thing that you hate spending money on? I'm actually really interested to see what you guys have to say to that response. What's one thing that you actually hate spending money on a regular basis? And we will get started here in a minute. I can tell you one thing that I hate spending money on is just frivolous things that I will never use, like garage sale items. I'm not a huge fan unless it's something that I'm actually going to use. But if it's something that I'm not going to use, I don't look forward to buying those types of things because they are no fun. I see a lot of people seeing taxes. Yes, that is absolutely something I hate paying as well. I don't think anyone likes to pay their taxes. Brianna says gas. Gas is not fun to spend money on right now. Same thing with Lisa. She said that. Ida says restaurants. Good for you. I actually hear a lot of people say that they like to spend money at restaurants. So very nice. Taylor says that they don't like to spend money for food. Parking, that's a great one too. I hate spending money for parking, especially when you go to like expensive, big cities and you got to pay, you got to feed the meter and all that stuff, especially if you're coming from the country or a suburb. That's never any fun. Jeff says he does not like to pay his mortgage. I say you don't like paying the interest, but maybe you like paying down the principal. Kevin says haircuts. Yeah, that's actually a really good one too. David, I'm kind of curious for you. What's one thing that you just hate spending money on?
Gas is up there. Here's my problem. I don't like spending money on anything that I know I'm going to have to spend money on again. Right. And that makes no sense because most of life is like that. But I really only like spending money on something that's going to pay me back later. So I'll buy an asset. And even if the asset loses money, I don't like that it's losing money. I'm still prefer to spend money on the asset that loses money because it will turn itself around and pay me at some point than food or a car that becomes worth less. And I'm eventually going to have to get rid of the car and get a new car. I hate spending money on food. Like that's a big one for me. I pretty much only do that if I'm with someone else and they really enjoy food. And it's like I'm making a memory with that person.
Yep.
Because it means something to them. But even then, I'm not spending money on food. I'm spending money on a relationship. But relationships pay you back. So I don't mind spending money. Is that make sense?
Yeah, that makes it's kind of like that's what we said like when my dad bought that boat that we used to use in at the end of high school and in college, right? Like nobody likes spending money on a boat and they always cost a bunch of money. Everybody knows the acronym for boat is bust out another $1,000 because you're just going to have to pay so much in gas and maintenance and that kind of stuff. But it's about the relationships or the people that you bring with you. You're investing into that, and then you get something in return. So that makes sense to me.
I like Jimmy's quote. This is for all you old-time OG Bigger Pockets fans. Jimmy Wisecarver here should be known as Wisecracker, not because he's white, but because he's cracking wise. Because he's mentioning Brandon Turner's favorite drink, the Starbucks Peppermint Mocha.
Yes. And he's also probably mentioning the inside joke that we had in the mastermind. That was like one of my big focuses going through this holiday season was to cut down those as much as I could.
Probably not for the money. Was it more just for the health reasons?
For the health reasons, and also just for the, us trying to get really good at tracking. And when I'm tracking and I see that I'm spending all that money on Starbucks peppermint mochas, I don't want to do it.
Bro, that's the thing we're learning in Spartan League with tracking. We all put it off, okay? I know why you guys don't want to talk about that. I know why you're going to want to talk all the time about what can I do to buy the next house? Because let's be real. When you buy a property and it cash flows, what you think is, I now have more money, so I don't have to worry about what I'm doing with the money I already have.
Mm-hmm.
But when you track stuff, it changes your life. If you are tracking what you eat, when you have an opportunity to eat a granola bar or a donut or whatever, you won't do it versus you'll go grab like a protein bar because you're going to have to put in there what you're eating. And if it's like there's any form of accountability, you don't like it. Kyle and I started holding each other accountable to workouts. So Kyle will say, I haven't got your gym selfie yet. And by the way, they're not like gym selfies I post online. They're just for him. Like, I need to know your ass worked out. And so when I know he's going to be checking or he has checked, at the end of the night, when I'm looking for reasons to not go work out. It's 9:00. It's 9:30. I'm finally wrapping up. I have to go to the gym. In fact, just last night, he hit me up with that before he went to sleep. And so he got his selfie while he was sleeping. But like, I wouldn't have gone to the gym if Kyle wouldn't have said, you need to be there. Okay. The cool thing is continually going to the gym pays results that I would probably take credit for, but really Kyle deserves credit for making sure that I did it. Lots of things in life are like that. When you're tracking it, you will feel different about what you spend money on. The things that you're spending money on now, you won't be able to stop until you start tracking. And the cool thing is when you're in a group of other Spartans, where the cool thing, why I like the Spartan concept is if you watch the movie 300, when Leonidas is teaching his son how to be a warrior, he's not just teaching him how to be better, stronger, faster than the person he's competing with. Oh, there you go, Kyle. Right? What Leonidas says is the strength of a Spartan is the soldier next to him. They actually had a style in the movie. Who knows if it's historically accurate? It just doesn't matter. Where they would have a spear in their right hand, a shield in their left, but their shield would be used to guard the soldier next to them, and they were guarded by the soldier on their right. So you were completely dependent on the other people to keep you safe. You weren't protecting you. You were protecting someone else, and you were depending on someone else to protect you, which meant you had to be one. You had to be a unit, okay? That's what this group is meant to be. The members have each other's backs. We share information with each other. If one person figures out a credit card hack, they share it with everyone else. That now becomes something the whole group can see. When one person figures out some psychological trick to spend less money, they share it with everybody else. If you want to survive the recession that's coming, you better be in an army. You better be in a group of people that have your back, and you better be building a financial fortress. The methods we've used the last 8 years, it's been nothing but up, which is just throw money at something. It's going to be worth it. Like, that made sense when we were printing money as fast as we were. It doesn't make sense when interest rates keep going higher and we're trying to slow things down. So, now I need to watch 300. That's funny. That's what Taylor said. So if you guys are interested in that, head over to, what's the website? It's not, SpartanLeague.com is not up yet, but where are they going right now, Kyle?
You can do two things. You can text Spartan to 59559, or you can go to davidgreen24.com/mastermind right there on the screen. And you can, if you do take advantage of it now, you actually get early bird pricing because it is going to change here.
Everyone who's in the group now will be grandfathered in at the price it is now, which is the cheapest thing I have. And then in the future, it's going to be more expensive. And then we'll have other groups that we're starting. They're going to focus on other components of wealth building, like making more money will be a different group. And I'm going to be starting a Discord channel. I think we're going to call it DG's World, where people can join. That'll be like, it won't be like an actual wealth building group where you're going to get like scheduled calls and guests brought in and stuff like that and accountability. But it'll be a place you can come if you want to talk to one of my real estate agents, one of my loan officers. You have questions about real estate. You want to see where we're buying, what I'm buying, what our other clients are doing. It'll be a community that is like pretty cheap to belong to, where you can kind of see what's going on behind the curtain. So we're working on the new website to finally get released. That's been pushed back a whole bunch, but once that's ready, we will then have these different groups that we launch. And so hopefully we'll have some testimonials pretty soon of people that have used these to make money.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the whole goal of this, right, is to A, figure out ways to where you can cut your expenses, B, figure out ways to where you can then make more money, and then C, get you in a position to where you can invest. Where the thing basically easily, if not tenfold, pays for itself. And yeah, I love it. Nadia said she likes the Spartan logo. I'm kind of curious, what are some of your guys' thoughts on the logo there at the top right hand of the corner of the screen? David, it took us a few iterations to get to this final kind of Spartan logo.
Yeah, that's right. We definitely, and it'll say Spartan League underneath it. This is like the smaller version, kind of like the lion head that doesn't say David Green Mastermind. I think that lion logo is going to be used for a group I'm going to start called the Coalition, because that's what a group of lions is called other than just a pride. So we use Mint within Spartan League, and then, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can use whatever you want. We just use Mint for the videos that we show people for how they're going to track. What everyone does need to do though is I have software that I created, like a spreadsheet where you go in and make a budget. So this is what I'm paying on housing, this is what I'm paying on gas, this is what I'm paying on cars, entertainment, food, whatever your thing is. You actually have to give every dollar a job, and then you use the software, whether it's Rocket Money or Mint or YNAB or whatever, to make sure that you are in line with the budget that you set up on the spreadsheet. And when you miss it, we just have conversations. Why'd you miss? What do you think? Do you want to adjust your budget so you won't miss it next week? Or do you need to make changes there? Do you think you need to make more money? Is that a problem? Like you're not making as much as you thought. Now that you have to budget yourself, there's not enough to go around. So most of this stuff does not. Oh, look at what Tyrone says. I see epic hats, hoodies, and merch using that logo. Please let me know when you launch the line. Tyrone, smart man. We are working on that as we speak. So there will be members that join Spartan League will get like a care package that will have merch in it with the logo, because we think it's pretty cool. We're having some quick flip hoodies made, which are like basically sweatshirts that turn into travel bags you can carry that are super cool and not cheap. We're having those made with the logo on it. We're going to have hats made, pens, like water bottles. It's going to be pretty freaking cool. You're going to be seeing me wearing this kind of stuff a lot, as well as Kyle, because it's a symbolic of our identity is switching to being people that track. We are going to be tracking our income, tracking our expenses, tracking our goals, tracking our workouts, tracking everything that matters.
Which is very exciting. Okay, cool. Well, let's jump into tonight. Again, we're going to be talking a little bit about the housing market. But before we do so, here's what I am going to do. I'm going to start a little ticker there at the bottom. If you're new, if you haven't hung out with us on a Friday night, this is how it works. We're going to be talking tonight about buying a house in this market. We're going to talk specifically about supply and demand and what that means. I think some people are looking at supply and demand. You might even be hearing a lot of real estate agents talk about that on social media, supply and demand. The supply remains very low, so demand's going to be high, which keeps the prices high. We're going to jump into that and talk about that. But here's the thing. If you've got a question about maybe your personal finances, maybe you've got some credit card debt, maybe you've got something that you're working on, maybe you want to start tracking better so that you can put yourself in a better financial position to invest in real estate or to just better your life. What you can do is you can actually send a text message to the number below, 833-777-0309. And what I'll do is I'll send you a link, and you can come in here and hang out with David and myself and ask your question live with everybody else. So that's the number down there at the bottom. The other thing is, if you guys are getting some value out of this, if you're enjoying this, don't forget, we need you to hit that like button. We need you to hit that subscribe button. We're trying to build on this every single week and get better at it. And we're also trying to bring you guys content that you find interesting and helpful to really better your position as an individual and as a overall person. So something we're excited about. David, anything else you want to add before we jump into tonight's topic?
I tend to tell people what I think they need to hear, not what they want to hear. So guys, I do understand that there's a part of you emotionally that might be like, this sucks. I want to find cash flow, especially because you've been told by so many people that finding cash flow is the holy grail of wealth building. But I don't think that's what you need to hear. I think what you need to hear is cash flow is a piece of the puzzle. And we do talk about how to find it. There are many other pieces, and the foundational pieces have to do with tracking your money. If you cannot control your own spending and you cannot control yourself, you are not going to be able to control big wealth, and you're not going to get it. That's one of the things I've learned. The wealth gods bless the people that they know they can give money to, and it will not ruin their life. If you think about people that have won the lottery, they often don't do well with it. They end up with a worse life than they had. You would never give the keys to a Ferrari to a 15-year-old that didn't know how to drive. They got to learn how to handle a car before they can handle that much power. And getting a huge portfolio of real estate is something that could absolutely crush you if you don't have the principles in place. So keep that in mind as we go through today's YouTube Live.
All right, let's get started on the topic. As a reminder, send a text message to the number below if you want to come in and jump on the call with us. Here we go.
The 2023 housing market crash is getting much worse. While prices today are down a minuscule 2.35% on average, the future of the market is looking grim, with reliable indicators flashing red, suggesting that a massive storm is coming, one that will rival the great financial crises of 2007. But what exactly is this clear evidence that is indicating such a troubling situation within the real estate sector? Well, we know from other researchers and experts that real estate values tend to follow volume and inventory. Now, without making this video a boring economics lesson, let's just simplify this theory with this. Real estate is no different than any other market on earth. At its core, it comes down to the simple relationship between supply and demand. So what does this look like in real life? Well, if you plot the monthly supply of houses versus prices, what you end up with is this graph, which is often used by experts like Bill McBride. What this graph shows is that as supply gets constrained, aka the monthly supply of houses goes down, what you tend to see is future home values increase. On the opposite side, it's in reverse. As supply gets expanded, aka the monthly supply of houses goes up, you tend to see values decrease. In other words, inventory usually tells you where the market is going. Now today, the supply situation is relatively tight. Normal is considered to be up here, yet we're way down here. This would normally be seen as something that would suggest home prices should continue to go up, which begs the question, how can I say there's a crash coming? Well, there's a big piece of missing information that is changing the entire theory and challenging everything we know about housing values. You see, if we plot the most recent readings of prices and monthly supply, you get this wild deviation from the norm. These new dots do not correlate to the rest of history. Basically, what we're witnessing today has never before been seen. Prices are down, but inventory is supposedly tight. Or is it? This is where I begin to argue the other side of this story. Maybe we're ignoring massive red flags, and I can prove it with some very reliable evidence. You see, this graph I showed you earlier maps the existing home supply, but if we turn to a different graph, we can see the new home supply. Now, you might be asking, why are we looking at new homes? Maybe this sounds like you're just cherry picking evidence, and this is a very fair question and assumption. But before you comment below, consider this. The new home supply has a higher correlation with future home value growth, which indicates that it should be looked to as a reliable predictor of what is to come. We know that new home builders are the price setters in many communities, meaning that throughout the United States, there are cities that follow in the lead of new homes. Think about your local market. If a home costs $300,000, but a new one costs $330,000, the choice is easy for most people. New homes typically come with a significant premium, and these premiums tend to act as an anchor for the rest of the market, dragging prices in whatever direction home builders are pushing. Now, the new home supply chart looks very different from the existing supply chart. In fact,
is it buffering?
Between the two is at an all-time high. The two numbers are so wildly different, it's causing many experts to question both the accuracy and reliability of the existing inventory data. How is it possible that the new home situation is so much worse than the existing home one? Well, nobody really knows the true answer, but what we do know is that the new home supply is behaving worse than what we saw in 2008 percentage-wise. We've had a sustained expansion in the number of homes, with the total number now approaching the '08 highs. Last time this happened, we got the worst housing crash since the Great Depression, and nobody's really questioning why it wouldn't be the same today. As you know, I've been preaching to you about the big housing collapse for months, and right now, mortgage applications are at their lowest level since 2015. They're down 35% since this time last year. So depending on where you are in the world, you might already be waiting for the smoke to clear. Interest rate hikes are slowing down for now, but there won't be a permanent stopping anytime soon. And as long as that's the case, I'm allocating some of my portfolio to alternatives. Back to new home sales. If you dig a little bit further, you can see evidence that we are in the middle of a perfect storm. Remember the chart I just showed, new home supply? This obviously measures the inventory of new homes. Clearly, as you can tell from the right side of the chart, we are flooding the market. From August 2020 to now, supply has increased by 160%, but that's not a shocking fact. While this growth is concerning, what is really making experts panic is the fact that new home sales are collapsing at the same exact time. From this chart, we can see that after reaching a peak in 2020, new home sales have declined by 39%. So in summary, we are getting record high supply growth at the same time we're seeing record sales declines. And then on top of all of this, there's even more concerning news coming from the home builders themselves. As Reventure Consulting has pointed out on Twitter, home builders like KB Homes, which is America's 6th largest builder, reported a cancellation rate of 68%. Yes, in this case, 2 out of every 3 buyers are suddenly walking away. And remember, this is going to cause an even bigger buildup of inventory. Back in 2008, large-scale builders reported cancellation rates of up to 50%, meaning that we are witnessing something today that's never before been seen in modern residential real estate history. If we look at privately held units under construction, which measures the number of residential units being built right now, you can see that we are at an all-time high with no reduction in sight. While we have seen a cooling in the speed of growth, from a pure numbers perspective, there is no slowdown. At the end of the day, the US has a massive backlog of construction. The builders, at least according to the Fed data, are not slowing down anytime soon. Now, if we think back to what I said earlier about how inventory tells the story and predicts the future, we can see how all of these variables are combining to cause a massive problem for values across the country. We are already seeing prices decline at a pace not seen since '08 in cities across the American West Coast. And while some eastern cities have remained relatively resilient, the slowdown will eventually creep into these markets as well, given the statistics I outlined earlier. Now, if this pace will continue is a question that everyone is trying to answer right now. If you listen to some of the top voices in real estate, they say that the market has found the bottom and it's only up from here. Most bull voices focus on the fact that people have quote-unquote adjusted to higher rates. We have seen the 30-year mortgage come down from 7% to 6%, which on top of the new year push has provided some hope for bulls. But this theory assumes that the entire reason for this slowdown has been entirely related to rates and not the macro factors we outlined earlier. If you look at the overall body of evidence, the bear case simply cannot be ignored. There is so much out there that goes beyond the interest rate increases. In fact, part of the reason that interest rates have skyrocketed is related to the increased perceived risk in the real estate sector. You see, there's this measurement called the treasury spread. This indicator is one of the best ways to analyze the market from a lender's perspective. Mortgage rates are mostly correlated with treasuries, specifically the 10-year yield. Now, we're not going to go into the specifics of this as it's highly complex and unnecessary in understanding my point. But what you do have to get is that the mortgage rate you see today is largely based on this financial instrument right here. As the yield goes up, so do mortgage rates. But there is a catch. Outside of this correlation, the market will push mortgage rates even higher if it sees risk in the real estate markets. This will become evident via a spread or a difference in the rate of the 30-year mortgage and the 10-year treasury. The higher this difference is, the more risk there is in the market. You can see in the last crash that we saw a massive uptick in the spread. And if we zoom out and look at today, we can see the same exact thing is happening. So the mortgage market is signaling that something isn't right. And the last time this happened, the entire house of cards fell through. On top of this, the Federal Reserve is pulling money out of the system, which is decreasing liquidity and reducing credit. And with rate hikes scheduled to keep going, there is no indication that mortgage rates will come back down to the 3-4% range we have seen for the past 10 plus years. So in summary, the bears have a solid case here. There is plenty of evidence that this decline, which started 5 months ago in the case Schiller, will continue. Remember, the last time there was a crash, it took over 5 years for the housing market to bottom out. For the rest of the year, we will be fighting a Federal Reserve that will continue to hike rates, pushing mortgage payments higher and higher. And as the economy falters, the spread we talked about earlier will get pushed up too. Besides these factors, we also have a large building boom that isn't slowing down despite clear indications from builders and data that sales are falling at a record pace. The same inventory indicators that have proved reliable before are now broken, and the new housing market is flashing red, with inventory surging and correlations alluding to massive price drops in the near future. While we cannot be 100% sure what the future holds, we can study history and the data out there today to paint a general picture. And right now, storm clouds are approaching on the horizon. Nearly every single indicator I mentioned is pointing to a troubling future, one where a housing crash seems not only probable, but likely. I would love to hear what you think about this data.
All right, so David, I can tell that you're itching to jump in and talk about that. But before we do, I want everybody that's here to drop in the chat what your guys' responses are to the video itself. What are your just initial thoughts about it? And you can do just as simple as an emoji, thumbs up or thumbs down, or you can give your specific, hey, I liked it, I didn't like it, here's the things I liked, here's the things I didn't. We're going to kind of jump into it and break it down. But let's throw it to you, David, because I can tell that you are itching to get started with it.
Can we get Mark Hansen to jump into the chat while I'm answering this? Mark, can you text the question or text the number here, and Kyle can work on bringing you in. Sounds like you're someone who has studied this kind of stuff. All right. First off, I thought it was a good video. I like that he did some research. I thought it was well edited, which is not a thing I normally even look at, but I like the work he put in there. The key point I think we should take from this is that numbers and data are things that people tend to rely on as if you know the numbers, you can't get misled, right? Like, I trust in science, I trust in numbers. The problem is science, data, numbers can all be interpreted differently. So that very same information he's providing could easily be interpreted in a different way. And it showed, like Mike said here, a slice of the big picture. It's just the slice that he is trying to show, because it's no surprise doom and gloom sells much better than any kind of positivity. And that is how this game works. So a couple pieces that I think we should keep in mind. First off, I liked his point that values tend to be related closer to supply than to demand. That is a great piece of advice to keep in mind when you're valuing anything, including real estate. When there is not much of it, it's likely to be worth more than when there's a lot of it. Same thing goes for dollars, which is why we printed a whole lot of dollars. They're not worth as much. Inflation is now taking off. And that's because demand is much easier to move and control than supply. It takes a long time to increase supply of housing. You got to build a whole new house. It does not take a long time to increase demand. Just lower interest rates or give tax incentives. Like, they can just snap their fingers and you can move demand very quickly, versus supply typically is on a lag that takes a long time. So I do like that he was mentioning you should pay attention to supply. I don't like the statistic, like 68% cancellation rate of home buyers. That is very normal when everyone's hearing news that we're going to have a crash. If you put a home under contract and now you're seeing that, or you're hearing that there might be a crash, or you're seeing home values are slowly going down, or you're like, oh, I don't have to pay that much for a new home, I could go buy an existing home for a little bit less. It's normal for people to back out of stuff. Or what if you locked in at a 6% interest rate and it took them too long to build the house, so it's 7.5 by the time the house is ready to be bought? That's a problem. You're going to back out of that deal. That does not mean demand has gone away from those homes just because those buyers decided not to move forward with it. I'm not looking at that like this is a huge problem. Something that surprised me was him saying that supply is at the point that it was in 2008. I haven't heard anyone else saying that. I'm curious where he's getting that data from, because I bet you we could find a lot of videos that show different numbers. It comes down to, like, is the data he's showing us indicative of the whole picture, or if it's a small piece of data that makes it look like there's all these homes? Because you guys tell me in the comments, do you see new homes being built where you are? When you're driving down the road, are you seeing new developments springing up? Because in 05, 06, 07, 08, oh my God, everywhere you looked, there was new homes that were being built. There were subdivisions and suburbs all over the place. Like, they were clearly building more homes than we needed. I'm not seeing that right now, but I don't know everything. Is there parts of the country where they are just building houses like crazy? I don't see that. It's hard for me to believe that's going on. And at the same time, do we have the same population that we did in 08? Like, is there a chance we have more Americans now? So even if we had the same number of homes in 08, what is that, like 14 years ago, 15 years ago, almost? Well, yes. Okay, Danny, in Miami, they're building a lot of houses. That area, it needs them. They can't sell them, build them fast enough because everyone's moving into South Florida. In Florida, there's new neighborhoods everywhere, guys. Yes, because that's the part of the country that all the population is moving to. But in other areas, are you guys seeing it? If you just live in like a regular Albuquerque, New Mexico, are they building houses everywhere? I don't know if that's going to be the case. And then also, we probably have a higher population. We still have people moving into this area. So there's certain parts of the country, I'm sure they are building homes, but that's because there's been such a shortage of them that there's like Arizona, Dallas, Nashville, South Florida. What are some other areas that, Kyle, you could think of where like a lot of people have been moving to in the last 5 years? Las Vegas.
Yeah. North Carolina.
Yes. That's a big one. Henderson, like Raleigh, and what's the other big city in North Carolina that I'm missing right now?
Charlotte.
Yeah, Charlotte. Both of those was very difficult to get a house at all. So they are going to be building there, but that doesn't mean that they're building like all across the country, all over the place. And people are still moving into those places. I really think when you work as a real estate agent, you see how fickle buyers are. It makes sense to you. It's not that there's no demand for homes. It's that buyers think that we might get a better deal if they wait. And Kyle, you can attest to this. Anytime a buyer thinks if they wait, they'll get a better deal, they find some reason to get out of the process. And that can make these temporary numbers look like no one wants to buy homes. But you see how fast that turns around when we get some stability, how quick the locusts all flood right back in.
Yeah, and you see the same thing with builders, right? Because what he's saying, I think, is correct in terms of the amount of cancellations for new home builds, where you got all these buyers who initially jumped in and then they became afraid, right? And then because of the interest rates going up or whatever, and then they backed out. But I think those cancellation rates have to be extended for a certain period of time for it to actually be a true statistic. So if you take what happened right now, and compare it to 2008 cancellations, I don't know if that's quite apples to apples, right? And so that can be a concern when people don't, when they do try to take those comparisons and assume that they're the same. But I have been hearing from a lot of the people that I know within the new construction industry that is absolutely true, that people are canceling, and a lot of builders are having to basically go out and provide a lot of seller credits, a lot of like rate buy downs to help the buyers feel more comfortable. But I'll be interested to see what happens in that area.
Yeah, if you think about what goes into building a house, there's a lot of things that have to happen, and it takes a long time to do it. It's like a battleship. It's very hard to stop once they've started to do something, but it takes a very long time to complete a turn. If you look at what goes into buying a house, it's the opposite. There's a million things that make people change their minds, which is why markets tend to crash or boom, because buyers move like flocks of birds. They all go in the same direction at the same time. So when you hear this kind of stuff, like let me get to the point of it. If the Fed came out and said we're dropping rates to 4% tomorrow, all of this talk of like, there's no one to buy these houses, I feel very confident would evaporate in a second. It's not that people don't want to buy. They just feel like if they wait, it might be better. And so they're sitting on the sidelines waiting to jump in.
Yeah, one other thing I'll add before we bring on Mark and kind of get his opinion. You got to be careful when you watch some of these YouTube videos. And I'm not saying it's this specific YouTuber, right? But a lot of you may have noticed there was a subtle kind of skip within the video. And what he was talking about was kind of his concerns with the housing market. And then his next sentence is, that's why I'm focusing my investing in, and then it went blank. Right. And the reason it went blank is I actually have this Google Chrome add-on called Sponsor Block, that anytime somebody has a sponsor within their YouTube video, it actually blocks it. Yeah. And so check it out. It's actually a really good
so that's Kyle, this is you and part of your Spartanness. You're like, I'm not letting advertisers steal my money. My shield goes up. You're not getting through. Kyle's not spending his money on anything that he didn't plan on it.
And I'm not going to be persuaded by somebody, to change my philosophy either.
That's right. I like that.
What's going on, Mark? Welcome to the live.
How are you guys?
We're good, man. I'm glad that we are able to get you in here. You're clearly a man who follows this stuff. And I don't know if we're going to agree, but it doesn't matter because you're educated on it, which means it's going to make for a better conversation. So thank you very much for raising your hand and coming in to talk about the stuff that the video's on, not asking me if you should buy the duplex or not. That has nothing to do with the video.
I appreciate the chance. So this may backfire on you. I'll be honest. I'm a 25-year-old kid that just got into real estate in the last year, but I spend close to 10, 15 hours listening to podcasts every single day while I work. So I like to think I know a little bit of something about it. So,
well, tell me, what do you think is going on with the economy right now? What's your take?
Honestly, everything that I see, like what I tell my clients when I go and talk to them is I just tell them they need to get out of their own head. I think a lot of people now are just relying on everything that is out in social media and out on the news and stuff like that. And I think it freaks people out more than anything. And I think we didn't really see that in 08 because social media wasn't so prolific in that time. But now everybody has an Instagram, everybody has a Facebook, you know what I mean? And so they take a couple of talking points that get them as many likes as possible and all that kind of stuff. And that's what people tend to see. That's what people gravitate towards. So I think that's what's going on. I don't think the market's going to be as terrible as they're predicting. I mean, we're going to have a dip after the last 2 years, right? But I don't think it's going to be anything as catastrophic as what they're talking about. So
Yeah,
at least from that
you
video.
made a good talking point earlier when you said compared to the last 2 years, anything looks like a dip.
Right.
That's a powerful point, because the way human beings tend to, I don't want to, what's the word I'm looking for? The way that we draw conclusions is based on emotions. And it's not like that's necessarily bad, but if you're not aware of it, it can be very misleading. So when normal became $500,000 houses selling for $650,000 with no contingencies and a 20-day close, and like, you know, you basically had to like kiss your realtor's firstborn child's hand, like kiss the ring. Like, when that's normal, what we're seeing right now, which is like houses taking 45 days to sell if they're not priced right, or price reductions of homes that aren't as competitive as the other ones, or buyers that want to get a home inspection and want some closing costs paid for, that seems like Armageddon. But it's not. Like, it's just, we don't have a good baseline is what I'm getting at for what we should expect a market to look like. It's been very unhealthy and tipped in favor of sellers way too heavy. This is good for the market in general, that buyers are getting a little bit of power back here, that they're getting a little bit of control over how things go. It feels way off balance, which I think was a really good point that you made. What do you have to say to that?
I think you're right into it. So I whenever I have a new client, that's honestly the first conversation I have with them is manage expectations. So when I talk to them, I sit them down and I'm like, okay, what are you expecting when you want to sell your home and when you're looking to buy a home? And even now, I mean, we're a year past the peak that it was crazy. I got into real estate in March of last year, and it was crazy then. That was like 3-4 months before the peak. And I'm from Utah. I'm about an hour north of Salt Lake. So our market's already crazy as it is. But that's the first thing I tell them is, yeah, I ask them, what do they expect? And usually even now they're still saying quick close, you know, lots of money over, or at least sell for whatever the list price is. And it's kind of interesting because buyers, not only is the market way more competitive for buyers, so buyers can get back into homes, but sellers have to actually have a conversation and come to the table. You know what I mean? There's a lot more that goes into selling a home, which is hilarious because yes, I only got into the market in March, but I've got a broker who's been in this for 15, 20 years and 3 other agents that I sit down with on almost a weekly basis in our brokerage that have had 15, 20 years. And they're saying it's just now getting back to what the average is. This is exactly what a market is supposed to be, is a month or two of the first month is, you know, the buyers come in and they look at the home and all that kind of stuff. And then after the first month, you have a couple of offers and you have your due diligence and all that kind of stuff. The back and forth is absolutely necessary. And it's great because I have buyers that I picked up when I first got into the market, and we're finally getting them into homes now. And it's been a year. You know, I've been working with these people for a year because a lot of them are like me. They're young, just out of college, or they're new couple, newlyweds, you know, that kind of thing. And so they just haven't been able to even try to get into anything. And that's the market that I focus on, is the young people, because when you sit down and have a 20-30 minute conversation with them just to manage expectations, they get super excited because they realize there's another chance. And so it's interesting to see that people, when you just give them a little bit more than the talking points that we saw in the video, their hope starts to skyrocket. It's really funny because just like they find a couple of talking points, right, and their hope dive bombs, you just have to change their way of thinking, and people are honestly all for it. So
Here's the sad part. This is the news that is going to depress everyone. Right about the time that we get used to this being normal, like buyers have a chance, rates are going to drop, the market's going to explode, and it's going to go right back to being insane because there isn't enough inventory, and homes and real estate is still by far the best investment available to average Americans. So if you're the person who's like sitting on the sidelines and you're like, I'm waiting for blood in the water before I get in, it might be 20 years before that happens, because our country has repeatedly shown they'll just print more money before it gets to the point that we're waiting for.
Right.
And like, I see what's happening, and to me, this is healthy. To other people, this looks like a crash, which is funny. I'm like, this is nothing close to a crash, like nothing close to a crash at all. But real estate markets are changing much more quickly and more volatile than they ever were before. And so you can't really ever get used to what it looks like. You just got to say, this is what it is right now. This is a strategy that works right now. And if I'm going to buy this property, what's it going to look like in 5 years, instead of trying to time everything perfect?
100%. No, I like that. So that's a really good point. It's really interesting what I'm seeing on our end in Salt Lake. Salt Lake's kind of different, it's kind of an isolated market because I tell most of my clients now that we became the new California when everybody started leaving there because everything went crazy. The demand here is just too high. We're never, even if the world suddenly implodes and there's a crash everywhere else, we're not going to have that impact because everybody wants to be here. So that's why I'm telling my people to get into a house as fast as possible. But not to mention, if you want to talk about even before the '08 crash, we were low on supply before the '08 crash. If you look at, statistical numbers for how people, or how, excuse me, how the market prepares for the future, we were short on supply even when supply was massively overinflated in '08, and it's just never recovered because so many builders went out of business and everybody got scared, and nobody wants to get back into that world. And if the market bottomed out in 2012 and people were finally able to get back on top, it was 10 years before the next skyrocket. And so you can't, again, it's just, I'm reiterating the points that you made. You can't really base it off of anything before or after 2008 because it doesn't compare to this one. But no crash will ever compare to the previous crash because that's the reason the '08 crash was so catastrophic, was because nobody predicted it, right? I love The Big Short. I watch The Big Short about once every quarter. For those of you that don't know, The Big Short is about the '08 crash and how it came to be. It's just the only way that something like that happens is if either everybody in the known world drops the ball or there's some sort of plan in place, and either way, you just can't predict it. The layman cannot predict it. So the opportunities as they arise now, that's why I love your talking point. You always say, how do you make money in the current market? That's a way better plan than trying to time the market, because you're just never going to be able to do it. So
It's a really good point. Another one is I believe people are better off to understand the fundamentals of what made a market go good or bad, as opposed to just trying to predict what the next one's going to do. When I hear someone say there's a crash coming and I say why, because what happened before, it's the fastest way of expressing ignorance.
Yeah.
Like, all right, if you can't even tell me why it's coming, you're just saying, well, it happened, so it has to happen. You're just nicely saying, I don't know what I'm talking about, and I know not to take you serious. The '08 crash was caused by bad loans being given out that caused a bubble. Builders then started building as many houses as they possibly could. It turned into this frenzy of, can I build a house, get someone to buy it? Because people were buying homes that didn't understand how to evaluate for cash flow. They were not investing in real estate. They were speculating. And when that bubble burst, the effects spread throughout the economy in a fundamentally damaging way. Like, the economy fundamentally went bad. There were people losing jobs left and right. No one's going to buy a house if they don't have a job. We don't have that kind of exposure in this market right now, and we don't have a fundamentally bad economy. Now, if we shut the whole thing down because another COVID variant comes out, I might change my tune, right? Because new information would make me, I'm not like stubbornly holding on to this idealistic belief. I'm just calling it like I see it. But as of this point, our economy is strong from a fundamental standpoint. So the market is not slowing down because of normal causes, natural causes. It's slowing down because we are pushing rates high, and buyers keep thinking, if I wait, the prices might come down even more. And it's just, that's literally speculation. It's just happening on the other side. So don't be surprised if you're watching these videos and you're like, I'm waiting. And then like the next president comes in and says, we're lowering rates back down, we need to stimulate the economy. And the next thing you know, it's a feeding frenzy and prices go higher than they got to be in 2019. And you see the whole thing happen all over again and more money gets printed.
it's really funny. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kyle.
No, go ahead. Make your point, and then I'll ask you.
I was going to say, just backing up everything that David's talking about, is the other talking point that I end up talking to people about when I go into these conversations about buying and selling a home is all of the buyers want to wait for 2% and 3%, and everybody knows that that's never going to happen again, just because we've been in such a stimulate the economy mode ever since 2008, 2012, when they were able to actually do that. I think everybody really knows that, but they're holding out because they're hoping it happens again. They're hoping against hope because, we had it so good for so long. You know what I mean? Again, all of the people my clients that I try and focus on, the younger ones, they haven't known anything else. They've known car loans that have extremely low interest rates, credit cards everything has been so low. And so I think even when you educate them, it's really hard for them to jump off that cliff of, yeah, this is just going to have to be a bullet that you have to bite, because that's how the world works. You know what I mean? But even to what David was saying, that's not a very popular talking point to have if you're in politics or if you're in economics or whatever it may be. And so nobody really wants to have that hard conversation when the reality is that's exactly what the economy needs. So I don't think that we're going to have any sort of leadership that actually, bites the bullet on that kind of thing in the economy. And so we're just going to have to keep, that's why I mentioned my other talking point was that's what David said about 2012. It took until 2012 for the market to bottom out. I think that's probably going to happen again this time. I just think it's going to be a much slower roller coaster ride. It won't be as steep. So.
Yeah, and first of all, our watches literally went off the same time to tell us to stand up. So I don't know, we must be in sync somehow.
We got to get on that.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. Like, and I think you say everybody's waiting for the crash, and that's when they're going to buy. But like, what happened last time was people started buying again in 2012, but people didn't start really buying until like COVID, when they started really focusing on the market, because it took a good 7 or 8 years of just fear and psychology and adjustment to be like, okay, yeah, because everybody in 2014, 2016, 2018 was saying like there's going to be another crash, there's going to be another crash. So it's just the psychology, and it's what it comes down to. What we talk about here is you have to be absolutely smart with your asset when you buy it. Doesn't matter if you're up or down, right? And then the focus should be on your own skill set and figuring out ways that you can make income in a solid way and continue to grow yourself and your businesses and then your portfolio after that. Just out of curiosity, Mark, what's your 2023 goals and your focus?
So my 2022 was kind of rough. So I've got a landscaping company that I started 5 or 6 years ago, and I really like doing that. That provides me a lot of flexible income. And the only reason I got into real estate was because I want to start a real estate portfolio. And my broker, actually, I met her at a BNI meeting when I started my landscaping company. We actually started a BNI together. And so we kind of talked about it then, but 2022, we didn't have a whole lot of snow that year, so I wasn't doing anything over the wintertime. She was like, just take the test, see what happens. If it works out, it worked out. So I got on and studied for like a month and took the test and passed. And so my 2022, I was kind of laid back, just trying to get into the flow of things, and I didn't sell a single home. So again, that's why I was warning David, this might backfire on you, but I also didn't go hard into the paint for 2022. So for 2023, I wanted to turn that around. My landscaping is going to become, I want to spend like maybe 10 hours a week in the admin side of that and have it kind of run itself and have my guys take care of most of the work. And then I'm going to be putting in probably 60, 70 hour weeks trying to get as many clients as possible. So my goal for this year would be 4 home sales and at least 1 multi-unit home under my belt, meaning I own it personally. So I'm hoping to get a duplex, or I'm hoping to get a 4-plex, but I'll settle for a duplex. Just trying to get into the market in this area is insane. So if I can get into something, I'll be happy. That's my goal. So. And
in your yard maintenance business, is it mostly commercial, residential, a mix?
We do, it depends on the year. I've done 50-50. Last year was kind of a 70-30. Commercial is really good because it's guaranteed work through the whole year. And residential I like because it's way more flexible. I don't have any contracts or anything like that. So I think for this year, we're going to stick closer to the 70-30, 70 residential, 30 commercial, just because that's a good balance for my guys. And then in case anything happens, employees are extremely difficult to find right now. I'm paying my guys anywhere from $3 to $6 an hour above what the market rate is, and I still can't find anybody to stay.
Wow.
So I've thought about just doing it solo, and if I do 30 hours a week, I can still make close to 15 grand a month. And that, relieves all of my financial burden if I just do that myself and cut some hours back on the real estate, and I can focus on that a little bit as I go through the year. So yeah.
Nice. Have you read Sold or Skill?
I haven't, no.
That explains it. Kyle's identified exactly why you're not selling houses, my man.
Because I haven't burned the boat?
Yeah, those are David's books that he's written on real estate, on how to be a real estate agent. So the first one was Sold, and that's about like real estate agent basics, your day-to-day stuff, getting started. And then the second book is Skill. That's more about building the skills you need to be an expert negotiator. And then his third book, which is coming out soon, right, David? Scale?
February 16th, I believe.
All right, we're a couple weeks away. That's Scale, and that's to really make it big, to be able to build a team and grow it in the same way that David has. So highly suggest you check out those books.
Okay, yeah. I got them on my Amazon, so I'll listen to them tomorrow while I'm working.
Right on. There you go. Combine it together. Thanks, Mark. We'll hope we see you in the future.
Appreciate you. Have a good
See
one.
you, man. Bye. David, have you ever been to Utah before?
No, that's one state I've never been into.
I think I went for by the way, I got to ask this because you know how people fill out the maps and they say, I've been to this state, I've been to this state, I've been to this state, all that kind of stuff. My question for you, David, is does it count if you have a layover in the airport as visiting that state?
Yeah, because you can buy a shot glass in the airport, right?
No, come on, man. Does that really count?
I don't know. I probably not. Like, I don't know how those things work because I suppose if you include layovers, it's much easier to visit.
Yeah, like a million different places. I think you have to at least experience one evening in the city or in the town or in the state or whatever, and you have to experience one little local thing. That's my criteria.
So here's my theory on this. Before social media, visiting different areas had more inherent value. It meant more because you would pick up on the vibe of a different area with people that acted very differently, thought very differently, valued things differently than you did. And I think that's still the case today, but to a much smaller degree, because I think social media has made us all so much more connected that we all do the same stuff. Like there's like inside jokes spread everywhere, right? If one group says spill the beans and the other one says spill the tea, like you might have had no idea until you visited that area. Now everybody knows everything, right? So traveling is sort of becoming there's not as much value in it as at one point there was when people bragged about the places they traveled because it was sort of you're more cultured, you're more aware, you're more balanced. Now it's like I'm on Instagram and I'm on TikTok. Oh, you're well traveled. You're getting both of the cultures.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Traveling is not what it used to be. It used to be this like, not taboo, but this really hard thing to do, right? And now it seems like everybody can travel relatively easy, especially within the United
States. You don't have to take time off work. Just bring your laptop with you and you can work from anywhere. Like airlines are all over the place. Airbnbs have made it incredibly easy to stay in different places. Like, yeah, travel is not the huge accomplishment like what it used to be. Now, this isn't to poo-poo traveling because I know people listening are getting defensive. Like, it's still cool to do. It just doesn't have the same value as what it used to have. Maybe traveling to another country where the language is different. Like I'm sure if you went to China, their social media is going to be very different than ours. You're still going to learn a whole lot there. But if it's like you're in Tennessee and you go to Texas or something, I don't think it's as different as it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Lisa's note here about did your app censor your language about sold, Kyle? Lisa, you can't censor me. That's the thing. I'm uncensorable, so it doesn't matter what technology you have. It won't censor me, especially when it comes to David.
And I make like probably 20 cents a book on all those books. So thank you, Kyle. Kyle might have just made me 40 cents right there on this call. We're picking
you
up
owe me,
steam.
man. Well, I'm trying to get you to buy me like a coffee or something. That'd be nice.
Peppermint mocha.
And I like this. Latimer says, I'm in Hawaii and the culture here is still very different from the mainland.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Hawaii is sort of one of those like what's like a bastion of independence. Like you go there and it's very different than everywhere else. That's a great point, actually, because they still have social media, but there is a strong identity in Hawaii. That's what it is. Like Hawaiians have their own identity and they don't get swayed from that versus some 19-year-old in like anywhere else in the mainland. They're just like whatever Instagram says to do is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. You know what also is a different, really different culturally is California. Like if you just go outside of California, just about every state is different. But then even in addition to that, Northern California is significantly different than Southern California. So it's pretty interesting.
I just think the gap is shortening. It is true. Like if you guys are not from California, you don't realize this, but Northern California and Southern California, two Californians are two different states. Like Lindsay is Kierka. She's here right now. I always say her name wrong. Is Kierka. She's on our call and she's our Southern California, the David Green team SoCal leader. And it might as well be she's our Texas team. Like it's so different. There's this barren wasteland in between called Central California that no one wants anything to do with. You have to fly to get there. I could literally drive to Nevada much faster than I could drive to Southern California. The cultures are different. The people are different. The styles are different. The values are different. That's a good point. It's very, very different.
Super different. Okay, cool. Let's bring on our next guest. We have Tyrone here with us. Tyrone, welcome to the live. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about what's going on in your life?
Yes. Hey, this is Tyrone. Thanks for bringing me on. I'm really excited. I had a few questions for you. It kind of grown since I've been watching the podcast, but I'm a full-time engineer in the medical device kind of world during the day, but then in the kind of in parallel and in the evening, I'm a flipper slash renovation company owner. And so right now I'm working on my fifth single family home flip. And I started like a 1.5 years ago. And every house that I've sold had a really strong potential to provide 1.2 to 1.6% rule or better. But I've chosen to kind of just do the flip, take the quick cash to build a nest egg, like 6 to 12 month nest egg. And my goal was to try to transition into a full-time real estate professional once I had that nest egg and move on that way. So I'm wondering, is that a good strategy, or should I spend more energy trying to figure out the whole strategy now, instead of focusing on the nest egg thing?
I take first shot at that, Kyle.
Yeah. So can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by nest egg?
It just like money in the bank. Enough if everything went to crap and I literally, like, worst case scenario, I could, fuel and live 6 months to a year and not have any income coming in. I know that wouldn't be the case, but I'm just trying to kind of prepare for worst case.
Okay, that's smart, and that's definitely you thinking it through. Like Phil says in the comments, you're definitely an engineer, so that's a good thing, and that's how I can tend to think as well. What's your biggest fear or concern with all of it, besides the fact that you might not make money for 6 to 12 months?
Um, My fear is that I'm missing out, a FOMO, I guess. Like I run the numbers for in the back of my mind, run the numbers for the hold strategy, and then the 1.2, 1.6% kind of rule. It really seems like I should not be focusing on the short term, the nest egg strategy, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Is there a way you can do both, where you can scale up your real estate side of things, but also keep your W-2 job?
Yeah, so like it feels like I'm at that breaking point to where if
Mm.
I did any more, I would probably severely like go down in my 9 to 5 and perform horribly there. So I'm teetering that line where multitasking is getting kind of restrictive.
And do you have consistent income? How long have you had consistent income coming in from your real estate endeavors?
Consistent income. I don't know. Flipping, I feel it's a lot of scary and hold time with no actual income. It's 3 to 4 months. So 1.5 years is pretty much I've made a profit on every single house that I've flipped. 30,000 to 60,000. So there, yeah, that, I mean, for 1.5 years, but like during the rehab, it gets scary because there's no income coming from that. So that's kind of, yeah.
And then what's your like home family situation look like?
Oh, I should be spending more time with the family, but I work like 12, 13 hours a day at the engineering job, and then my whole family, I'm kind of taking the Grant Cardone approach where I have my whole family in the business. So like my wife's looking at tile at Home Depot, picking out different color patterns. My son's figuring out how different businesses can kind of help fuel that business, like a cleaning business that helps with the final cleaning during renovation. And so they're working on TikTok. Our daughter is working on TikTok. So they're kind of involved. That way I can kind of cheat and say, yeah, I'm doing stuff with the family, but you know,
That's
yeah.
cool. How many kids?
Two kids.
Two kids.
Yeah.
And then your wife work or stay home?
She pretty much stays home. She works like 10 hours a week at the airport, and we get free flights everywhere in the world. So, yeah, but she pretty much stay home.
You can't count your layover as visiting a place. Just remember that. But my last question for you, then I kind of want to throw it over to David. But do you like being an engineer? Like, do you like that line of work?
I do, but I know that that's not the long-term play because I love real estate way more. I don't even consider it a job.
So
It's
you basically got this scratch that you really want to itch, this desire that you want to meet, which is to scale up your real estate side and actually move into that full time and basically see how high you can fly. But your question is, how close do I need to get the boat to the dock to be able to make the jump? Is that right?
yes, exactly.
All right, I'm going to throw it back to David for this.
All right, Tyrone, what is motivating you? We're talking about quitting your job as an engineer and going full time in real estate, right?
Yeah, yep.
Why is that appealing?
Uh, I I've been studying. I'm an engineer. I've been studying Grant Cardone for about 4 years, and I know that that multifamily space is where I need to live in. But just trying to gain trust and experience with different investors. But I really basically building a legacy, building wealth, building businesses that last forever for my family so they don't have to struggle if they want to go to a good school or if they don't and they want to go into the professional, they have options. So freedom is really driving me, not freedom just for me, but freedom for my kids and my kids' kids. So that's where I really want to go in the end, and that's what really fuels it.
So you want to be a syndicator in multifamily housing?
Yeah, all of that. I want to own, I want to syndicate. I want to build multiple businesses that fuel that. As far as cash flow goes. So the flipping business, I plan to always do that. But maybe have that fuel and have a construction company fuel the real estate syndication and having my own properties too. Yep.
Can you see that there's a little bit of lack of clarity on exactly how you want to get into real estate full time?
Um, yeah. I see it being like a basically a flipper and managing properties, like maybe duplexes at the near time because I don't have a huge amount of capital. But it's yeah, I have a plan all laid out, but it just I don't know how close I should get it to where I say, okay, now's the time to pull the trigger.
Well, are you unable to leave the engineering job? Or sorry, are you unable to do real estate full time because you're stuck in the engineering job? Like you just don't have time to do both?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, see, that's a hard for me one, man, because I never was in the spot where I could not do both. Like as a cop, I could work an 18-hour shift, but there was points in the 18-hour day where I didn't have to be doing something. I could talk to an agent, I could look at a house, I could send a text to ask about questions on what I was trying to do. I didn't have to read through legal documents or put together stuff like that. Like it wasn't to where my job was holding me back. It was my effort might hold me back. Like you have to work twice as hard. Maybe it sounds like with your job, you're locked in, completely focused on what you're doing when you're at work. Is that right?
Yeah. Every time I look at a text message from a contractor or a thing from a realtor, I feel guilty because I should be improving this machine or improving a process or building a new design for medical device. There's always something to do at work. Yeah.
All right. What is there a different position at that job or a different job where you could use your same skills but not have to be doing the same stuff?
Yeah, I could step down. So that's the other thing is I could like take less responsibility, a little bit less pay, and have way better freedom of my time or a little bit more control of
Bro,
my time.
that seems like the obvious answer from what we've heard so far. I'm not
Okay.
telling you that right now, but I'm saying before you go cold turkey, I'm quitting my job and I'm going full time in real estate. Take that step where you still have most of your money, but get a lot of your time back and work out some of these kinks in a safe way. And when
Mhm.
they're worked out and you're like, man, I got this down. I've got more flips coming in that I know what to do with. I've got more opportunity to raise money. I'm good at what I'm doing. Then we have the conversation about quitting your job. Now, here's why I'm giving you this advice because I could be wrong about some things. I don't want to crush your dreams. I want everyone to understand why I'm advising you the way I am. 10 years ago, definitely 20 years ago, for sure 15 years ago, there was not much competition to buy real estate. Okay. In a short period of time, it has gone from the coolest secret around to the worst secret around. Everyone knows about in buying real estate now. It is wildly competitive to get into this. Okay. we used to tell people quit your job and go full time because it was like reaching your hand into a barrel of fish and coming up with a fish. Like you just had to have time to put your hand in there or motive to put your hand in there. And if you quit your job, you would go grab fish. Whereas if you had the job, you're like, oh, the fish smell bad. I don't want to get my hand wet. There's always excuses. Okay. It has changed so much since that first advice that there's people like dying to go in there and get those fish. They're trying to grab them with their teeth and there's nothing to grab. Like the deals are not out there like they were because you have hedge funds that we're competing with. You have full-time syndicators. You have groups that have pooled their monies together. You have every Tom, Dick, and Harry going out there looking at how they can get a house. Okay. I'm not discouraging anyone from investing in real estate. I still do it too. I'm saying the method of like just quit and go do this instead was so much easier to achieve when there wasn't a YouTube live that people could listen to how to do this. You literally had to know the only guy in town that owned real estate because a podcast was not a word when this was first going around, right? Like blog was a new thing when people could buy real estate that way. And so I'm the only one I know who's kind of advising the majority of people, don't quit your job. That advice was really wise 15 years ago, 10 years ago. It's not the best advice right now. Now you will get to a point where you can quit your job. Okay. I'm not denying that. But you're going to take a lot longer to get there than it used to because there's a lot more competition than there used to be. Is that right? So before with a family, especially before you just quit and say, I'm jumping in with both feet, like I'm burning the boats. Like, okay, if you're that type of person and you really feel it, I'll tell you how to do it as good as I can and I'll encourage you. But you're probably not that type of person. You're an engineer. No engineers do that. Okay. Like just step back, get some time back, take a little bit of a pay cut, hint, start tracking your expenses, and you might find a way to save money when you're budgeting that is equivalent or greater to the pay cut you're taking. So you actually don't lose money. You just spend less money on dumb things, or your family spends less money on dumb things, might I add. Like that's an issue like that married people have to be aware of. Sometimes they can be very disciplined. Imagine having a body that you weren't the only one that ate for. Like whatever your spouse ate is what the fat you had to take on. That's kind of what being married is like with finances. But if you can get everybody doing that, it will put you in a position where there's less risk involved with cutting back on your hours. You can give yourself the runway that you need to get some of these kinks worked out and then come back in. Let's have that conversation about if you should actually quit and go full time.
Okay. Yeah, that's really insightful. Gave me a lot of thought. By the way, I do want to agree with you. I am an engineer, and I think exactly how you're saying. But over the last 4 years, I've been nonstop like listening to you. You've heard Grant Cardone, and it's actually changed the way I feel about things and the way I act. I don't know how to explain it, but now I'm like an anti person that is obsessed, basically a very obsessive person when it comes to like making something work. So I'm kind of shifting. But I had a couple of other questions that my best buddy wanted me to ask you about Phoenix, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Okay. So in Phoenix, there's the new water regulations that are being added that will, I guess, restrict the development of new housing and require developers to find additional water sources. So do you see this having an impact on the market, positive or negative? And how will it affect the potential growth, long term?
You're saying Phoenix is going to be changing the way that water comes in?
They're changing the way, they're basically making it harder for developers to build new housing, and they're requiring them to find additional water sources.
Yeah.
And
I don't think it'll have an immediate impact. I think over the long term, it'll just reduce supply, which will keep that market a little bit stronger than it has been. But I don't think that it won't make that market perform differently than we're used to, because Arizona has been growing as Californians are moving there. So Californians are going to keep moving there. It's way cheaper than California. It's also a little bit hotter, but it's not such a different climate that us Californians can't handle it. And if the problem is that they overbuild all the time. Phoenix and Vegas are the same type of market where they have booms and busts. People move there, they build way too many houses, they sell a buttload of them, and then the spigot turns off when people stop buying or they stop moving that way, and then they have way too much supply, and then the market crashes, and then everybody moves there, and then it goes up again. Like what you're talking about might just kind of ease up these huge spikes. and just kind of
Okay.
like balance it out a little bit more. And then you can expect Las Vegas to be the one that just goes up and down all the time.
Okay. All right.
All right, man.
Well,
Thank you. We'll keep your fingers crossed for you on that 10X path.
Keep us updated too, man.
yeah, thank you. We'll do.
Thanks,
Tell
Tyrone.
Uncle Grant that David Green said hi next time you talk to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same is true for what we were talking to Tyrone about for real estate investing. It's the same for anybody that wants to get into something new, whether that be a new business endeavor or if you just want to be a real estate agent. Don't just go quit your job and jump into this new thing thinking you're going to make a ton of money. Like David said, a few years ago, that might have been the case. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that might have been the case. But I'm seeing that with a lot of newer agents too, who come to me and say, hey, Kyle, I want to quit my W-2 and I want to get into real estate. And I recommend to them that they do both, right? And I did the same thing. Remember, David, like I got my real estate license and then I worked part-time as an agent. First of all, I hated it when people would ask me if I was a part-time agent. I was always a full-time agent because I would put 40 hours into it and then another 40 hours into my regular. So I'd say I'm not an exclusive agent yet, but I am a full-time real estate agent. And then I actually scaled down my hours at the hospital. I went working from working 5 days a week to 4 days a week to 3 days a week. And I realized I can live, and I realized I could live off of like 2 or 3 days a week when I was living off of 5. And then it got me to the point where I was finally able to make the jump after I had built up my book of business, after I built up my skill set to be able to handle it. So
it's the same thing as me. Like you kind of followed my path. I got my real estate license and I started working less overtime. And then I started working no overtime. So I just kept my job as a cop without any overtime. And then I stepped back from being a cop for a couple months and used up all my vacation time. And then I went back into it for a little bit. And then I stepped out on medical leave and I just couldn't do anything else. So I just sold houses, which was hard to do. And like my feet were so terrible, I could barely walk, but I would just like sit down during open houses instead of like stand up. Right. And then eventually I just retired from being a cop. So I'm a fan of the transition phase. Other people like Grant Cardone, Brandon Turner, they're a fan of the jump out of the plane and build a parachute on the way down strategy. I can't tell you which one is better, and I can't tell you that one is better. I honestly think it has a lot to do with your personality. If you know Brandon, like I do, he doesn't do anything halfway. He needs to feel the pressure to act. Like the guy wouldn't exercise, and then he signed up for a triathlon and like had 9 weeks to prepare for it or something like ridiculous. And he prepared for a triathlon over maybe it was 12 weeks, but it was like no one does that, right? And then he went and did a triathlon. And then the minute that the triathlon's over, he's right back to like, I don't want to exercise. He knows himself. Brandon needs to feel that if I don't do this, I'm not going to get there. So he gives advice based on how he does stuff. It's not bad advice. It's for people like him. I'm not like that. I don't like jumping into something where I don't know where I'm going. I like to have a plan and I know what I'm going to do when I get there. And then when I have a clearly defined plan, I want to throw everything I have into it. So I give advice that way. So as you guys are listening to this, don't ask, is David right? Is Brandon right? Is Grant Cardone right? Is Tyrone right? Ask, who am I and what would work better for me? And then follow the advice based on your own personality type.
Yeah, your personality type and your personal financial situation. Those are huge.
Yeah.
All right, we got another caller here that's going to join in and hang out with us, Chris Figueroa. Chris, welcome to the live. What's going on in your world?
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to be here to the both of you.
Absolutely.
Right on.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, perfect. David, I definitely connect more with what you're saying. I can't just like jump into it without having a plan. And that kind of leads into the question that I sent you guys where I'm currently trying to up my income. So I'm trying to get into a trade job here in Boston. I don't know if I should say the names or not, but basically it's pipe fitters and plumbers. I applied to 2 separate unions. My goal with that would be, like I said earlier, just getting skills that I can then take into real estate. I am not too capital heavy right now, so I would like to house hack, and I feel like those skills would build on and go well together because I'd be able to, like, for example, work on my own properties, and after like 5 years after completing the apprenticeships, and becoming a journeyman, I can then also get a master's and potentially like roll it out and start like a business. I know that's like thinking ahead and I should slow myself down, but if I'm willing to house hack, shit, I guess my question is, how do I avoid all the distractions and like the fear of missing out and just jumping into the market? Um, I'm
All
sorry,
right,
I
let
don't know
me.
if
No,
the
I think
question
I'm
makes
I'm
sense.
following you. Here's what I'm hearing you say. I have a path to make money, and you're going into the future to see what it's going to look like, and you're wondering, am I doing too much of that, or do I just need to take it a day at a time? Answer is no, you're not doing too much. The problem, not the problem with what you're doing. The way it can go wrong is if you assume that because you have a plan, it's just going to happen. That's where people get screwed up. They're like, oh yeah, I'm just going to get on this path and like an escalator, it's going to carry me to the top. That doesn't happen. Okay. So it is a map that you look at. You say, I'm going to climb this mountain. This is my first stop. This is my second stop. You have a plan, but you actually have to take those steps. Okay. So that's the first thing that we want to talk about. The second thing is you're getting this mixed up with like, well, if I do that, am I going to miss out on my opportunity to invest in a house, to house hack? And so now
Yeah,
your brain
exactly.
is clashing. It's like, man, I want to be a real estate investor, but I also want this job, and I don't know what the right move is. And you're viewing it like I'm either going to climb this mountain or I'm going to climb that mountain. And I can't do both. Okay. Let me give you a different way to look at it based on how I look at my own finances and the way that I advise people, which is different than every other influencer in real estate because they're all trying to sell courses that tell you that you're supposed to use their method, whether it's the subject to or the flipping or the wholesaling or the whatever the new flavor of the month is. They're selling you a course and telling you the only way to get there is to go all in on their method. Okay. I don't see the wealthy people that I know that did it by going all in on one thing. In fact, I see people that come to ruin going all in on one thing. What I'd like for you to do is to look at life as three different pillars or three different paths that all operate independently of each other. But the things that you learn in one can also help you in another one. Okay. So imagine that you're Deion Sanders or you're Bo Jackson. You're probably not old enough to know who Bo Jackson is, but you're one of those athletes that could play two professional sports. You're that good. But in our world, trying to play football does not take away from your ability to also play baseball. In their world, it did. You only had so much time. You couldn't train for both. Imagine that wasn't the case. Okay. One of your paths is defense. One of your paths is offense. And the other path is investing. When I say defense, do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
And when I say offense, what do I mean by that?
I believe that when you say offense, it's what I'm currently trying to do, which
Okay, let me
is
clarify. Offense
obtain.
is just making money.
Yeah, like making
Right?
money. Sorry, what I meant by what I'm trying to do is like obtaining skills to make money because
Yes. Yes.
um
Yep. That's
I
exactly right.
think what you mean by defense, correct me if I'm wrong, is for example tracking my net worth, keeping a personal financial statement, tracking my savings rate, and having
Those
a
are all a
budget.
part of defense, but defense itself is just saving money. What you're mentioning are the tools that you use to be good at defense. Okay,
Yeah,
so did you play sports, Chris?
I play football.
I thought you were going to say that. I don't know how I could tell. All right. So so let's say that defense is stopping the other team from scoring. The tools were you a DB?
Yeah, not a linebacker, but I was the end, even though
You were
I'm pretty small to be
you were
the
like
end.
a safety?
No, the end,
Oh,
like
defensive end.
on
Okay.
the line, but at the end of the line.
So you got tools as a defensive end that you could use for pass rushing. You've got tools that you could use for run stopping. Maybe at times you might have to drop back into coverage, and there's like literally fundamentals that you learn: how to move your hips, what stance you're going to be in, how you come off the line. Those are all tools, but their purpose is to help you with stopping the other team from scoring. Okay. The things you're talking about, yes, those are parts of defense, but nothing stops you from crushing it at each pillar individually, which means you could be very good at saving money. You could also be very good at making money, and you can also be very good at investing in real estate, and they will not take away from each other. In fact, if you want to be very good at investing in real estate, what do you think the number one thing is that you need to have in practical terms?
I believe that I need to have money to invest with to
Thank you
begin
for
with.
saying that, because no one wants to hear that crap. What they all say is like, oh, you just got to have drive, got to be creative, got to have ambition. Yeah, that you can, but the whole thing gets a whole lot easier if you have money. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
anyone that made a bunch of money in real estate that didn't make money already. And the people that are telling you how to do it without money, they are often making money selling courses telling you how to do that. So it's not really the same. Okay.
I took some of those courses.
All right. Thank you. Having money is what makes real estate investing possible. Okay. And the best way to get money is to make it and save it, which is why I talk about offense, defense, investing. So my example to you is to focus on excelling at all three of those things. Okay. Saving money using the budgeting software that we talked about. I don't know if it's in your budget to join Spartan League, but that would be a good thing to consider when it is. It's only a couple $100 a month right now. Making money is what you're talking about at work. Yes. Pursue being a tradesman. Give it everything you have. Fight and fight and fight to get a job. And when you get a job, go to work every single day with a great attitude and tons of energy, saying, please teach me everything you know. Offer to do every single job that you can. When you get a guy who's like salty and old and doesn't want to work hard, jump in and say, can I do that? Can you show me how to do that? Let me do that for you. Work out every day until you are exhausted and have nothing left to give. Have a great attitude. Go home, fall asleep, wake up again and do it again. And then go to your supervisor and say, what else can I do? Be hungry like the player who wants to make the starting team or wants to make the all-star team and knows he has to fight to not get cut. You want to show up every day like you're trying to keep your spot on the team, and it's tryouts. Okay. That will not take away from house hacking. It will make house hacking easier because as you're making more money and your job is more stable because they love you because you have the best attitude and you're the smartest worker and you're the most skilled worker and they can rely on you the most, you get more hours, you get promoted faster, you make more money. It will make it easier to get into real estate investing. And then house hack. And then once you get that down, house hack again the next year. They're not mutually exclusive, Chris. It's not like, am I going to house hack or am I going to work? I'm trying to break people out of thinking of it that way because that's what stops so many people from investing in real estate. They're like, well, I got a job, but I also got a family. So how am I going to invest in real estate? You don't have to quit your job to invest in real estate. I still haven't. I mean, I've quit some jobs. I just took on new jobs, right? I got a lot of jobs. I host the Bigger Pockets podcast. I write books. I run the David Green team. I run the One Brokerage. I run Spartan League. I do content like this. More things I'm not even thinking of right now. I buy rental properties. I manage the contractors. I make content. I have a whole bunch of jobs. They make it easier to invest in real estate. They don't make it harder. Right. So at your stage, I want you to be intently focused as much as you can, pursuing excellence in those three pillars: defense, offense, and investing.
Perfect. Don't be so one track minded, basically, because I feel like I'm very one tracked at the moment. I'm trying to break out of that. I just don't want to at the same time, like, I always think I'm spreading myself too thin if I'm not focusing on one thing at a time.
Well, okay. And in some cases in life, that's true. And you got to know your own self. Maybe like you only have the capacity to learn one thing at a time. And maybe the trades are going to be that demanding. But don't think that, like, what I believe is most people get on autopilot in life much more than they think they are. Like, you know, you'll hear people at practice. It's like, man, I'm out here busting my ass. You ever know that guy that would say that and you'd watch him practice? You're like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You don't even really work that hard. Okay. Like, but he says things like that. Like, man, I'm killing myself out here. Like, you are lazy. You don't even try. Okay. Like, so many of us do that with ourselves. We say, I'm trying so hard. I'm working an 8-hour day. I'm like, you got 24 hours in a day, right? Even if you sleep all 8 hours, you still got 16 hours to do something. Half of that was spent working. That is not busting your ass, right? That's just like the bare minimum of going to work. Okay. So what I think about is when I'm making these videos, I'm 100% locked into this. When Kyle and I shut it down and I go to starting to write the book that I'm working on, I'm 100% locked into that. When I lock that down and I go into the gym, I'm 100% locked into the gym. Okay. Like, it doesn't mean I can't work out because I did a YouTube live right now. I'm using mental muscles right now. I'm using articulation muscles. When I go there, I'll be using physical muscles. And when I write the book, I'll be using analytical muscles. It's completely different stuff. Okay. Don't talk yourself into thinking that you can only do one thing at a time. You can only do one thing at a time in that moment. Like, you can't play football and read a book in the same time. Okay. But like, when the game's over, it's not like I can't read a book because I'm tired from playing football. You absolutely can do that.
Yeah. There's a time and a place, basically. And when I'm doing a certain thing, devote my full attention to it. But that doesn't mean ignore everything else, basically.
How long is a typical football game that you would have played in?
About 2 hours, maybe.
Okay. Of those 2 hours, are you working the same degree of work for the whole 2 hours?
Probably not.
Right. And the average play is like what? Like, what's the play clock? 30 seconds, 40 seconds?
I would say maybe, yeah, about 30 seconds.
Okay, and then out of those 30 seconds, on an average play from snap to it's over, what do you think, like 8 or 9 seconds maybe?
What, say your question again?
So the quarterback snaps the ball. How long on average before the play is dead?
I feel like 10 seconds.
That's a long play,
Yeah.
I think. Right? Like he hands the ball to running back is tackled. It probably didn't take 10 seconds for that to go down. Right?
Yeah, less than 10 seconds.
It's probably like 4 or 5 seconds on a running play, maybe like 8 or 9 on a passing play. If it's a huge play, it might go longer. But in general, out of those 30 seconds, you only have to give your all for 8 or 9 seconds on average. Okay. Which means 1/3 of the actual football game, you're actually giving everything you have, which is how you could play a 2-hour football game. You could never do that if you were just going, and it never stopped. Like we couldn't play basketball if there was no fouls. You never got a chance to catch your breath. You never had substitutions. You had to play the whole game and the game never stopped. Like you don't see UFC fighters that go in there and fight for 45 minutes, right? Like you can't do that, but you don't have to do that because that's not how life is set up. Life is set up to give you breaks.
It has those built-in breaks.
Yeah. So don't tell yourself like, man, I'm going to get overcommitted. No, you give it like your coach would never say to you, don't play your hardest because you got to save something for the fourth quarter. Like, nope, for those 6 seconds that play goes, you give everything you have, you catch your break after that.
Yeah.
All right, man. It's all butts between your ears. If you tell yourself it's hard, if you tell yourself it's too much, you'll find a way to make it that. And if you tell yourself I'm young, I got energy, I'm an athlete, I'm smart, I can figure this thing out, you're going to feel like learning that trade is stupid easy compared to some of the other things you did. You're going to have plenty of energy left over to go learn investing, and you're going to have plenty of energy learned over to save your money.
But I just got to get out of my head. But definitely thank you for basically having me on. Thank you for your books. I have sold, and I have long distance real estate investing somewhere back here. So I feel like I have a lot of knowledge from the books, and now I'm just trying to get out there and take more action. And eventually, I also, like I said, I want to get into my first house hack, but it's like I can't think of it as do one thing or the other.
Yes.
I just have to start piecing together the
I want to
puzzle
see you
and
get the
do
most
it
out
all.
of yourself, Chris. If you have a day where you don't do something with real estate investing and you didn't make money and you just overall were like, I wasted today, go run, go to the gym, go do something that you could feel good about yourself when you put your head on the pillow. Like start building the promises that you make to yourself that you're going to give your best every single day. And then what other people consider hard will not feel very hard for you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
See you, Chris.
See you. Have a good one.
If you're just joining us, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps the channel. It helps us know what kind of value you're getting out of this. If you're not getting any value, hit the thumbs down button. That's
That's
okay
a good
too.
point. Tell us if we suck. We're okay with hearing that.
Totally.
Sometimes you suck.
Sometimes you have an off night, right? And that's okay. You just got to bounce back and play the next day. The Kings had a tough loss a couple nights ago, but that's okay. They didn't.
The
play too
Warriors
well.
really needed that too because the Warriors barely won that game. So the West.
What was up with Steph Curry getting ejected for throwing his mouthpiece?
Did you watch it? Did you see the play?
I saw the highlight, but yeah, I saw it.
He was mad that Jordan Poole shot a 3 with 12 seconds on the clock when he could have passed it to Steph, and so he threw it in frustration. But
well, he's the man. You got to pass the ball to the closer, man, at the end.
well, yeah, but throwing your mouthpiece is a great way to make sure you don't get the ball again.
Yes, and I think he was trying to plead his case. I threw it in a certain direction. I didn't throw it out into the crowd.
He's right. I mean, sure he did, man. Like Steph's an honest person. I do agree. It just doesn't matter. Like, don't do dumb things that you don't have to worry about.
Yes.
It's what's funny is that he's been ejected 3 times in his entire career. Every single one of them was from throwing his mouthpiece into the stands.
That mouthpiece gets him into issues one way or another, right? Because he's either like chomping on it and people are making fun of him, or he's throwing it and getting kicked out of games. So
yeah, that's exactly I mean, our mouthpiece gets us all in trouble, right? What does it say in James? The tongue, though small, is like a spark that can cause a great fire.
Yes, be careful with thy tongue. All right, well, I want to jump into one last video on this topic. We've been having some really good discussions tonight of, will you regret buying a house in 2023? We talked a little bit about supply and demand, what that means. We've talked about new construction, cancellations, what that means, what that may not mean. And we've had some good talks with some of our our members here that have called to chat with us and really had some good focuses on what we should be doing individually right now in this market. But one last video that I want to bring up is a video of we've watched him before. His name's Stephan, for those of you that don't know him. And he actually created a video called Why You Will Regret Buying a House in 2023. So I'm going to pull this up and we will get it started and get your guys' opinion. And what I want you to do is, as you're watching the video, if you have an opinion that starts to formulate it, drop it in the chat box because we want to hear it and we want to see it. And I don't think he has one ad at the very end, so you won't see that skipped. All right, here we go.
What's up, guys? It's Graham here.
Decline across pretty much everything, I felt like it would be appropriate to address everyone's concerns, share my thoughts about what's going on, and explain what you could do to prepare, coming from someone who's been involved full-time in real estate since 2008. After all, it's reported that home prices in the Bay Area have already fallen 25% in just the last 8 months. Dallas has already dropped 10% since June, and Barclays believes that national values still have another 10% sell-off to go, while rents just saw their largest decline in 7 years. That's why with the current market turmoil, combined with even more upcoming rate hikes, it's crucial that you avoid these 7 common mistakes anytime you buy or invest in real estate. Because I promise, from all of my experience buying, renting, selling, and investing in real estate, these next 15 minutes could save you a lot of money and a lot of headache if you just pay attention to a few pitfalls that almost everybody makes that could be easily avoided. And all I ask for in return, if you find this video helpful, is just to hit the like button or subscribe. I know it seems silly to ask for it, but it does help with the channel tremendously. And as a thank you for doing that, here's a picture of a llama. So thank you guys so much. And now with that said, let's begin. All right, now to start in real estate, there's a common saying out there that says that you make money when you buy, not when you sell. And to a certain extent, that's true. That's why it's so important that you do not overpay. Now, obviously, if we're talking about your one-of-a-kind forever home where money's no object, then by all means overpay. But for everybody else, as hard as it might be to admit, most likely the home you love is replaceable. And because of that, you could afford to negotiate. See, here's the thing. When I was working in real estate, it was so unbelievably common to see a buyer get excited about the aspects of purchasing a property, then get overly emotional of the fear of losing it, and then all logic goes out the window. At that point, it makes it impossible to see whether or not there might be better opportunities out there, or you begin thinking to yourself, what if nothing else is as good as this one? Like I mentioned earlier, with real estate, the best opportunity always comes at the time of purchase, because there are deals to be had where you could buy an undervalued property that's worth 5 to 15% more the moment you close on it. This not only gives you additional equity, but it also insulates you in case the market keeps falling. After all, every single property out there makes sense to buy at the right price. So if you can find that price and match it to the property, you're good to go. That's why you should always understand how much homes are recently selling for, set a maximum price from which you're willing to pay, be aggressive with your inspections, and then just stick with the plan. Obviously, you shouldn't lose out on the perfect deal because of a $50 leaky sink, but you also shouldn't pay more than what the market says it's worth at the very most. Second, you should not be buying a property if you haven't run the numbers to determine how much it's actually going to cost. Of course, when I say this, I don't mean, oh, the property is going to cost $400,000 and the mortgage payment's going to be $2,700 a month. Instead, what I typically see happen is that someone buys a property and severely underestimates the amount of repairs it needs, or they overestimate the amount that they could get for rent. And it's usually a combination of both. In fact, even though you might think that this only applies to investors, homeowners do this all the time when they blindly walk into a property being completely unprepared for things to break the moment they close. Or even worse, they didn't realize that they could have just rented the home for a fraction of the price and then waited to find a better deal on something else. So from my 15 years of experience in real estate, having sold over $130 million worth of homes when I was working full-time as an agent, I will tell you with 100% certainty, expect that every repair you do is probably going to go over budget. So when you're planning a renovation and you're trying to do the calculations to determine the end value, just assume you're going to spend 25% more than you plan to. I don't need to see the numbers. I don't need to know how reliable your contractor is. It just happens every time. In addition to that, it's also incredibly common for new home buyers to magically forget about all the minor day-to-day annoyances that begin to add up over time, like insurance payments, landscaping, utilities that run more than expected, property tax increases, and regular maintenance that you would never think about until you own a home. All of this could easily add up to an extra few $100s a month that nobody thinks or talks about until they've already owned the home for longer than a year. That's why it's so incredibly important that you know how to evaluate a property, understand how much it's going to cost to renovate, add in a margin of error, include miscellaneous expenses, and realistically know how much the property is going to rent for. Otherwise, you could be stuck with a property that costs too much to own, with zero profit, and without the potential rental income to cover your costs if needed. Third, another common mistake out there is to make sure that you do not take on too much debt. Now, don't get the wrong idea, because this can be okay if you're safely making enough to cover the cost of the payments or you get a low enough interest rate. But the problem arises where you take on too much debt to the point where you become entirely reliant on rental income, a strong housing market, or a strong job market to continue sustaining those payments without anything else to fall back on. The fact is, unless you have the income and the savings to carry through that mortgage in the event of a loss of income or a job loss, you could go broke really, really quick. Just look at what happened in 2008 when people took out too large of a loan and couldn't ride out the drop in prices. In a way, that's beginning to happen again now for those who have not already locked in their interest rates as prices begin to fall across the country. The last thing you'd want to happen is that you can't make your payments, you can't rent out the property at a high enough price to offset your costs, and you can't sell because you owe more than what it's worth. That's why I typically recommend coming in with a 20 to 25% down payment for anything that you purchase, so that way you have a bit of a buffer to fall back on just in case. Fourth, speaking of loans, I would personally stay away from short-term or adjustable rate mortgages unless you really understand what you're doing. The problem I see today is that it's cheaper to take the short-term adjustable rate mortgage than it is to take the 30-year fixed, especially with the mindset that the Fed is going to U-turn and lower interest rates in Q4 of 2024 because they'll have to. However, this is not guaranteed, and you could very well pay more in the future if interest rates continue increasing. Not to mention, as of today, banks will barely give you a discount for taking a short-term loan versus the guarantee of locking in for 30 years, so why take the risk? My thinking is that a 30-year term is going to give you the assurance that no matter what happens, your payment will stay the exact same, and because of that, you're able to plan far out in advance in terms of your monthly budget. Then from there, if interest rates do go down and you're able to refinance to something cheaper, go for it. But we can only speculate what interest rates will be 10 years from now, and that's personally not a risk I'm willing to take on one property with such a large amount of money. From there, fifth, you should never buy real estate with money that you need short term. Now, one report from Forbes found that it takes an average of 5 to 7 years just to break even on a property purchase once you account for the costs of buying, owning, and selling. And if that sounds absurd, just consider this. If you buy a home for $300,000, most likely you'll pay an additional $6,000 in closing costs, insurance, and fees. From there, you're also going to be responsible for all the miscellaneous expenses that come with owning a home, like property taxes, insurance premiums, repairs, random things that you'd never think about that just comes up out of nowhere, which let's just say averages to $3,000 a year. That means to break even on the property after 5 years, you'd have to sell that property for $340,000 or a 13% increase just to be left with $319,000 after all of your closing costs, which is enough to compensate you just for the costs of buying, selling, and owning a property to begin with. Now, yes, of course, real estate does tend to trend upwards over time, but that's not guaranteed. So if you're looking for a quick way to make cash, most likely this is not going to work in your favor. That's why I always recommend to only buy a property that you intend on keeping for the next 7 to 10 years. That way, your chances of breaking even are significantly higher, and maybe you'll even turn a profit. And sixth, the same thing could also be said about buying a property without having enough cash saved up. From my experience purchasing 8 properties over the last 12 years, it is so important that you have enough money saved up for all planned renovations, plus 25% because you know it's going over budget, and have enough to pay for all property expenses for at least 3 to 6 months. Otherwise, I promise you're going to be running into a situation where you have a $2,000 repair, you'll have to put it on a credit card, and you'll be scrambling to pay it down as fast as possible to avoid the high interest rates. Or a tenant moves out out and it's $4,000 to fix the walls. Well, it's empty for another few months while you try to find another tenant who pays less than expected because national rents are dropping. I know it sounds excessive or fear-mongery, but trust me, it happens all the time and it's something to be prepared for. However, one of the easiest ways to soften the blow is just to plan for it ahead of time and assume it's going to happen. What I personally do is just keep a checking account for every single property that I have, and no matter what, I always keep 4 to 6 months worth of expenses in there at all times for anything that comes up. Once the amount exceeds that level, I'll transfer it over to invest it elsewhere. It's that easy. It's really simple. That way, anytime there's a repair, there's money sitting on the sidelines that's accounted for that exact purpose. I keep it simple and it doesn't need to be complicated. And finally, for all of you real estate investors out there, do not pick a bad tenant or the first person who offers you the most amount of money. I'll give you 2 personal stories that I've had to deal with. My first was all the way back in 2012 where I picked the first tenant who called. At the time, I was desperate for money. I had sunk everything I had into renovations. I had nothing left to fall back on, so I just accepted it. And within 6 months, he stopped paying, he trashed the place, and I had to go through with an eviction. By the time I actually got him out, it cost me about 4 months of lost rent, $8,000 in damages, and another few $1,000s in eviction fees. That was more than an entire year's worth of profit just lost because I happened to pick a very bad tenant. I've also witnessed other tenants who I like to call professional tenants who simply put up the bare minimum to move in, and then they stop paying. And they know that it's going to take them anywhere between 3 to 12 months to actually get evicted, so they just bank the money instead. The point being from all of this is that you have to be very, very picky, because essentially what you're doing is entering into a business contract with a complete stranger for the next 1 to 2 years, and you need to make sure that you both have clear expectations and can communicate with each other in terms of what each of you expect. Now, overall, though, since then, for the last 10 years, I've been really fortunate to have amazing tenants, and I credit that to picking the person, not the price. I typically do not take the highest offer. I just want somebody who stays there long term, is really nice to work with, pays on time, and treats the place as it's their own. That's all. That's why I'm never in a rush. It's always better to find the right person than get the highest price. From doing all of this, I truly believe you're going to be in a much stronger position to buy or invest in real estate throughout these next few years, even if the market continues to decline. My personal philosophy.
All right, we're back.
Kyle, what do you think so far? What do you think about that video?
Once again, super catchy title with very basic content. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. Will you regret buying a house in 2023? Yes, if you overpay for the house. And we say, don't overpay for a house. Find a good deal. If you don't recognize that there is work involved in owning a house, there are expenses involved in owning a house. There is maintenance involved in owning a house, right? I just went to a house today. One of our clients, we had an inspection, and I loved it. The inspector told my clients, every home needs a hug. Right. And so every home needs a little bit of work to be done. And sometimes people aren't aware of that. And you're going to get buyer's remorse if you buy something and don't realize how much work there is to that you have to deal with on that house. And then obviously, yeah, if you've got tenants, make sure you pick the right tenant. So, I mean, it literally just to me was real estate fundamentals, real estate basics.
Yeah, I listen to those videos because he is so good and big on YouTube. And I'm like, who listens to this that sees that and they're like, I got to watch another of these videos. It feels like saying, here's how you use the lock to open the door. Make sure your doors have locks. Make sure that your house has windows or that you have a smoke detector. There wasn't a whole lot in it that has to do with real estate in general. We're trying to give people a little more detailed nuance about like how to what houses to buy, what deals work in what market. So it made me feel better about the show that we did tonight. Actually, it's not like he's saying anything bad at all.
Not at all. I actually really like Graham Stephan. I think he's entertaining and he delivers information in an entertaining way and in a practical way. And it typically is relatively decent and good advice that he gives. And he's very good at his craft and what he does.
It's probably geared towards people who know nothing about real estate. I think our audience is a little more educated.
Yeah.
That wouldn't, like you saw the comments, people were making some funny comparisons because that's child's play to the people in our group right now. The only thing I don't like is that he's giving you all the reasons not to buy real estate, which as the influencer, no one will ever get mad at you if you say don't do it. But the people that were telling everyone don't do it, there's a crash coming for the last 8 years. They cost a lot of people a lot of money. Like you could just throw spaghetti at the wall in the last 8 years and you made some pretty good money in real estate, and not taking action can actually get you hurt quite a bit. So take it with a grain of salt. When you hear him saying like, well, yeah, there's closing costs associated with real estate. So if you buy a property, you can't sell it unless it goes up 13%. You shouldn't be buying any real estate if you think you're going to sell it in a year. That's just like terrible advice. That's why we talk about how properties cash flow and you're holding them for a long time. I think our audience is at a point where they don't need that kind of information. I liked, is it Kenose? David Green, you told me to join Spartans. Is that different from David Green Mastermind? Very good question. It's not. It's the same thing. It's going to be rebranded as Spartan League once we get the website made. And we've already started the change of, instead of just talking, like the group started off with just me sharing all the stuff that I was doing, and it's sort of become more specialized into how to protect your wealth, how to build a financial fortress that will survive any recession. And it's going to be rebranded as Spartan League as we change the focus into that. But it is still, if you're joining right now, it's still David Green Mastermind. So you'd go to davidgreen24.com/mastermind. And that's all I have. Mark, if you're trying to get a hold of me, you could get my email from Kyle. Now that you're a member, that'll probably be easier than sending me a DM. That's a very good chance I won't see. 2023 though, is this a good time to buy a house? I think if you're buying in good neighborhoods and if you're holding for a long period of time, you will look back and this might be one of the best times ever to buy a house, because I think we're going to have another big run up after things change. But if you're looking at the next 12 months, the next 6 months, I don't know how long, it's probably going to feel like a stupid decision to buy a house. You're going to think you should have waited. And that's very normal. The very first house I ever bought, I thought I should have waited longer. I'm such an idiot. I jumped in too early. And now that thing's gone up from, I bought it at 195. It's probably worth about 545 or so right now. I'm not mad about that decision. I'm not like, if I would have only waited, it would have dropped to 185 and I could have made another 10 grand. That's normal. That's how real estate works. The thing that you will regret is if you buy in a bad neighborhood and it takes a lot longer to turn around and you're stuck with an asset that doesn't perform well, that you can't get rid of. For the last 8 years, if you made a mistake, you could just sell it and someone else would pay more and you could go buy a better one. That's probably not going to be the case. So you still got to take your shots, but you just want to aim tighter. You don't want to pick up properties in the wrong neighborhoods because this market will not be as forgiving. Any final words from you, Kyle?
Yeah, I just want to give a personal shout out to Mark, man. Signed up for the Spartan League and the Mastermind. Super excited to get to know you some more and hear a little bit more about your story and watch you grow, man. And we'll keep our watches synced up throughout this whole experience. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. I'll leave this for Isaac Habib says, why get funding to purchase a residential property as opposed to a commercial asset like a single tenant net lease, a property that's safety attached with a credible tenant? Well, the short answer to that is commercial properties, it is much harder to get a safe tenant there. Tenants can break their leases easier and it's harder to keep them in place. Like when you have a vacancy with a commercial property, it's much more expensive than residential, harder to fill. The funding is also not nearly as desirable for a commercial property. You're typically getting a adjustable rate mortgage or a balloon payment after anywhere between 3 to 5 years. That kind of sucks. Residential, you get in that 30-year fixed rate sweet space, which is really nice. If you're looking for the perfect blend, contact us at the One Brokerage. We have what's called a DSCR loan. That's basically a loan where we will take the income of the property and approve you to buy it based on the property's cash flow. So we don't have to necessarily use your income if your debt to income ratio doesn't work. So you can email us there, intake@theonebrokerage.com. Talk to one of our lenders, and we are working on another group called, I think we're going to call it DG's World. It's going to be a Discord channel where if you join that, it'll be very cheap. And you'll be able to talk to real estate agents, loan officers, have questions answered about different real estate related topics, see where we're buying properties, where our clients are buying properties. If you ever want to know, like, who at the One Brokers is getting loans and where are they buying, or what are the David Green team people doing to make properties work in San Diego, you'll be able to talk to other clients that have bought with us, as well as the agents that help them do it. So we want you guys to be able to buy houses, because I don't know a human being that looks back 30 years ago and says, I wish I wouldn't have bought it.
That is absolutely right.
All right. Thank you, Kyle, for being here. Thank you, all of our listeners, for doing this. Before you go, please take a minute to subscribe to the channel so you get notified when we go live in the future, and like this video. Next Friday, I will be in Lake Tahoe, but Kyle will be hosting this. And do you know what the topic's going to be, Kyle?
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about my personal story. A lot of people don't know it, have been asking about it, and then curtail that to people who maybe have had similar experiences of either leaving their W-2, moving into a new business venture, real estate, paying off student loan debt, paying off consumer debt, and talking a lot about the stuff that we do in Spartan League.
There it is. Thanks, everybody. You'll have Kyle Friday, and I'll be back the Friday after that. Have a good weekend.
See you guys.